Hello, this is Danpro. Welcome to my rigging channel and another Blender rigging tutorial. Today I'm going to start a new tutorial series on creating a facial rig. Now a facial rig can be a little bit intimidating, especially if you've never created one before. There can be a lot of moving parts there, but hopefully I'll be able to break everything down to easy to digest parts here and show you that at the smallest pieces of each part of the facial rig is actually pretty easy, so there's nothing really too difficult. It's just a lot of moving parts. So there are two main methods we could use to create a facial rig. One would be to create a bone-based rig, and that was obviously be to create deformation bones, and then we would weight paint the mesh to those, and we can make them interact with each other with control mechanisms and control bones. The other way would be to create shape keys, where we're just directly creating a shape key for the expression that we want. For example, we can just make a smile or a frown or something of that nature, lift up the eyebrows, make them surprised or angry. Or if I grab one of these other ones, maybe sad. Inner one's for angry. So actually multiple methods we could use there. And the reason what I'm going to do is kind of a combination of the two. So I'm going to do bone-based rigging for the kind of the broad strokes, because I think it really gives you a nice fleshy result. And when you can kind of push and pull different vertex groups against each other, and you get a nice fleshy result on your facial rig. And for fine-tuning controls, it's actually kind of hard to set up mechanisms behind the scenes to do the micro expressions at different portions, like the inner eye and the mouth corners and things of that nature. That's easier to do with shape keys, so we'll do our fine-tuning controls with shape keys. I think it's just the best of both worlds, and it's going to give me the opportunity to show you the techniques for each one. So the character that I'm going to be rigging is called Gramps. Now unfortunately I cannot share Gramps with you because it's actually a purchased product. Now way back about 10 years ago, when I first got into 3D and 3D animation and rigging, I did so with a program called Poser. Now Poser actually had a huge library that came with the program of different characters, both realistic and cartoony. Now Gramps is one of those characters. Now just as kind of a tribute to the way I got started with 3D, I just wanted to bring Gramps in and rig him up in Blender here. I thought he was a really cool character, so unfortunately, because it's their property, I cannot share that. So if you need a mesh to follow along, I'm going to suggest that you get the Eve mesh that I used in my Rigify tutorial series, and you can get that for free from BlendSwap. Now, before we start rigging, I just want to mention a few things here. We always want to prepare our mesh for rigging. Now, I don't need to do this for the character that I'm going to start with. I've already gone through this process. But if you do want to download Eve from blendswap.com, she did have a few errors in there. So you're going to want to check the mesh, remove the doubles, check normals. You want to center and scale the mesh appropriately in your scene. Make sure that she is aligned properly on the x-axis, so we can use the x-axis, the x-mirror tools and the symmetry tools for our armature. And then of course you want to apply the transforms to make that, basically set her in her default space and then apply the transforms so those objects are all in their default space. So if you don't understand what any of these things mean, I actually have a tutorial where I've went through all of these steps for the Eve mesh, so you can check that out. It's again a part of the Rigify tutorial series. You just look for Rigify, and I believe I called it mesh preparation. So once you've got those steps, now I don't need to go through those, so we can go ahead and get right into rigging for our Gramps character. So with the cursor at the center of the world, cursor to center, I can do Shift A. I can add armature, single bone. Now a few options that I like to enable right away is one, maximum draw type for my armature. I always like to have that set to wire, because sometimes my rigs can be very complicated and I'm going to have a lot of bones sitting on top of each other, and I can just resize them a little bit and see all of them through each other. So I like to have that option enabled. And under armature properties, the man icon here, I like to have X-ray enabled and also axis enabled. So when I go into edit mode or pose mode, and I'll be tabbing quite often between the two. If I forget to say what I'm in, if the bones are orange, I'm in edit mode. That is where we add bones to the armature and where we do our parenting between those bones. And if I'm in pose mode, that is where we obviously pose our character, and also where we're going to add our bone constraints and where we parent our meshes to the bones. So we'll use two methods to do that. Sometimes we will parent meshes directly to a bone in the armature, and sometimes we'll parent it to the armature object itself with armature deform. And in those instances, that's where we're going to use weight paint to move the mesh with different bones, so multiple bones, and then we'll use an armature modifier. So with our first bone, let's go to side view here. Let's rename this to root. Now in edit mode, I want to select the very tail end of it, do RX -90, and lay that down. And the reason I want to do that is because I want this root bone to be aligned with the axes of the world. Now the important end of every bone is the fat end down here. That is where the head is. So in pose mode, that is where it rotates from. That is why I've aligned it this way. So it's important to have that aligned with the axes of the world. Now we can go back and add a couple new bones to our rig. I'm going to actually select the mesh to help me set that bone for the neck. I want to select this lower loop, Shift S, cursor to selected, and I can get back to my armature. In edit mode again, Shift A, it's going to add a new bone right at that 3D cursor. I'm going to go to side view, I'm going to select the top end, drag this down to about the base of the neck, right behind the ear here. It's about where your skull tends to rotate from, right behind the ear, and then pretty far up. So let's name this to def.neck. This is going to be our neck deformation bone. Then E to extrude with this top selected, GZ, drag up a new bone. This will be, whoops, def head. Now in pose mode, I want to set whether these bones are deforming or not. Now by default, when you add a new bone to your armature, it's going to automatically be set to deform. So under bone properties, I'm going to select the root bone because that is not going to be a deforming bone. Now you can always kind of categorize every bone in your armature under three main categories: a control bone, our root bone is our control bone; a deformation bone, obviously these will be deformation bones; or a mechanism bone. And those are bones that are going to kind of work behind the scenes to make everything move properly, and those are bones that the animator should never touch. So actually the deformation bones should also be bones that the animator should never need to touch. So let's just be very conscious of whether they are deforming bones or non-deforming bones. Now basically we have the basic setup where I can start parenting a few of our meshes to this, and then we can start building up our armature from there. So I'm going to select my main mesh for the face, and I should mention that I have multiple meshes here. I have the main skin mesh. On this other layer I have separate meshes for the eyes, the upper teeth, lower teeth, and the tongue, and of course the hair and the eyebrows. So I want to select Gramps head, which is the skin mesh, shift select the armature, and I'm going to do Control P to set parent with armature, deform, and automatic weights. Now a bunch of things happened all at once with that single operation. Now basically the Gramps head mesh was parented to our armature object. If we look here, as you can see the parenting relationship, parented to the armature. It also added an armature modifier. Now we want our armature modifier above our subdivision surface modifiers if we're using one on our mesh. So we need to click that arrow to move it up, and that's just going to be more efficient. You don't want your armature, the bones in your armature that are deforming your mesh, to have to move the subdivided mesh. So for every face in here with 2 levels of subdivision, it would have to actually move 4 or 8 faces. So every subdivision level will be, the first one will be 4, the next one will be 8, and then 16, and so on. You just want it to be set up this way for efficiency. So I also like to have edit mode toggles enabled and also preserve volume, and that's just going to help the squishing and squashing when you're bending between the bones. If you don't have preserve volume on, you're going to get a lot of volume loss, and this will prevent a lot of that. Alright, so let's take a look. Let's just go ahead and where's my armature at? Which level? It's on. I want to move this to this lower scene level here so I can just isolate it here, because I'm going to enable that scene layer and also this layer with the eyes. I'm actually going to parent these eyes directly to our def head bone. I'm going to select them, the left and right, and then shift select the def head bone, Control P. Now in this case I'm not going to use armature deform because it's not going to be a deforming part or a deforming mesh. I'm going to directly parent them directly to the bone, So I can choose bone, and now when I move that head bone, rotate it, you'll notice that those eyes are going to stay exactly relative to it, so they're not going to move whatsoever. However I move the bone, they're going to stay at the same position, basically like they're stuck to it. The reason I'm doing that is I want to show you a common issue that you're often going to run into. Now if I go back to my armature here and I start rotating the head, you'll notice that it looks like the eyes are pulling out of the head. Now the reason for that isn't because the eyes are actually pulling away from this bone, it's actually the weight painting on this mesh itself. So one of the things I like to do is follow a pretty strict weight painting workflow, where once I paint with automatic weights, I'll go through and do an auto weight cleanup pass. And basically, because auto weights will usually extend the weights way too far into parts of the mesh that we don't want. After I've cleaned those weights out, or put them to 0, then I clean the 0 weights, I'll normalize the weights, and then I can come back and fine tune the joints. So the joint between the head and the neck, I will go axis by axis, so x-axis first, z-axis next, and then do the twisting axis, and I can just check them and weight paint to fine tune it. So that will be the weight painting workflow that I use throughout this series. Let's just go in there and quickly do this. I'm at about 11 minutes right now. I want to make this under 15 minutes, so hopefully we can get this done. So weight paint, let's turn on weight paint mode. You'll notice that our head bone is slowly getting less and less towards the bottom. If we select our neck bone, you'll see that we have a lot of blue influence up here. Now I have the show 0 weights set to active, and the reason for that is the 0 weights will show as black, and if you don't have that enabled, it will be blue. The other thing I like to always enable is wireframe display mode when I'm weight painting. This will give me more of a flat shading, and then I can also see the topology. Let me go to tools. I want to subtract, and for this pass I'm going to click off auto normalize. So I want to remove all of these weights here. Actually I want to subtract. I want to subtract all these weights here. I'm actually going to enable the see-through option so I can paint on the inner part here. I want to turn my strength and weight all the way up to 1. Make sure I can just do this quickly. Make sure that I'm getting all those weights on the inner part of the mouth. If I go to side view here, I really just kind of want to follow this topology line all the way down the jaw. So take all these weights. Now your head is actually pretty hard surface. I mean, you've got the muscles that sit on top of your skull, but you can pretty much think of it as a hard surface object, so you don't want a lot of influence from your neck up there. Let me just turn the weights down to about 0.1 because I just want to reduce a little bit of this down here as well. Now we'll check this as we're waiting here a little bit, but see how this looks. Alright, now just because I have painted 0 weights doesn't mean that I've actually cleaned the weights off of there properly. Now I need to go to edit mode of my mesh to show you this. So if I select one of these vertices up here, you'll notice that even though the weights for def neck are 0, they're still part of that vertex group, and we don't want that. So it's just a messy way to work, and I want to clean these out. We could go through vertex by vertex and click them off, but that would actually be a pain. There's actually a tool that'll do this in one shot. I'm going to select all the vertices in my mesh, go to weight tools, and find the clean function. I'm going to click that, and then we have some options down here. Now you want to make sure you have deform pose bones selected, because you don't want to, if you have other vertex groups doing other things on your mesh, for example controlling hair particles or masks or things like that, you don't want to do this for all those groups and mess those vertex groups up. You want to only do this for vertex groups that are deforming the mesh with your armature modifier. So always click deform pose bones, and then the limit here, I'm just going to leave it as 0. It's going to clean out all the 0 weights. It'll leave anything that's above 0, and you'll notice that I get a nice really clean result here now, or in edit mode rather. All those weights are gone. If I select one of these, they're no longer influencing that. Another thing that I like to do in edit mode, after I've cleaned the weights, I need to normalize them. So I'm going to click normalize all, and then again I'm going to uncheck lock active and check deform posed bones only, so we're only normalizing the weights that have to do with deforming the mesh. And now, if I select the head, it should be very dark red here. So that is exactly what we want. Let's go back to object mode here, get on a wireframe, and see if that has fixed our problem with our eyes slipping out of the head. Let me actually just move these eyeball meshes to the first layer here so we don't have to look through teeth coming through the face. That's a little creepy. So there we go. Now again, as part of my weight painting method, usually then after I've auto weighted, clean the weights, clean the zero weights, normalize the weights, and then I would go through and fine tune the joint by rotating it axis by axis. So basically, go back to weight painting mode here. Rotate this on the x-axis, and now we'll just kind of add and subtract weights to get this proper. And at this point, now we can actually go to auto normalize. And let's add. Go to add. It's pushing in way too much out here on the chin, and we'll just, with the armature posed a little bit, we can just kind of smooth out these weights a little bit. See how it looks when we go up. That looks relatively decent. I think I want to subtract this line down here. If we do the side to side, probably add a little bit more influence. I'm going to go to a weight of 0.025. Just get a little volume preservation there. That looks relatively good to me. If we rotate it, that looks relatively good. So that is the weight painting process that we'll be using over and over as we add new deformation bones to our rig. Alright, I think that covers it for now. Up next we'll do some, probably the eye rig, I think. Something easy to start with. So I hope this tutorial series is going to help you. I hope you like it. Please give me a like and subscribe. Until next time, good luck.